Never mind.
Welcome, everyone. We'd like to call the September 14th, 2022 Hartford Board of School Directors meeting to order. Hi, Hava. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Nice to see your faces, even if not in person.
Well, at least you're not sequestered somewhere. Geez, I spent today with about 2 or 3 different people that one was sequestered to their basement, one to a back room, because of our friend or unfriend.
Yeah. Well, ours is not friend related. It's just a summer cold and we've all had it. And I didn't think you guys wanted me to share it.
Well, those things have been going around as well. So, so thanks for not sharing.
Do what I can.
So I guess the first order of business will be to see if we have any changes, additions, and approval of the agenda.
I don't have any changes, Coach. I would like to move that we approve the agenda as presented.
I'll second.
Oh, you're all set.
I'm all set.
I was just showing the agenda.
Oh,
Thorough, very, very thorough. So we have a motion on the floor to accept the agenda as submitted. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved. Communication and support to the board. We do have a student report. She had a schedule interruption at the last minute, but she did submit her report. So Mr. Hathorn, would you like to do that?
Roy was going to share a couple things from her report. And,
Yep.
Want me to start?
Yeah, no, we're all set. So Sydney wanted to share some things about student life. Students are happy with their classes as well as bonding with new faculty in the building. Freshmen are adapting and becoming more comfortable within the school. The music department finished casting and has begun rehearsals for this year's musical Footloose. They're very excited. Sports-wise, they're super excited to return to more normal settings. So that I would say, just in general, as an aside, everything I've seen in the buildings wandering around it, to see all the faces without masks, I can see why they're excited to get back to some of these. Students are replying well to new and past guidelines. Clubs are starting up again. New clubs are also being added or being processed. An example is the volleyball team, which is new to the high school.
Cool.
And they had their very first event. And so I guess they recorded a recent victory against Vermont Commons. I'm not sure. I've never heard Vermont Commons before, but I know that they did have their first event, so that was a big deal. Couple of areas of appreciation. She wanted to applaud the administrators for everything they've done to get the year up and running, and it feels like on a daily basis there's a consistency and a continuous effort to keep everyone safe, welcomed, and healthy. And also wanted to recognize that the ability to access mental health resources. Students are able to get information about counseling, get help within the school to receive the supports they need to succeed, which benefits students' mental and physical well-being as well as their education and emotional state. So I thank you to Sydney for sharing it with us, even though she couldn't be here, but those were the key topics she wanted to make sure you all knew about.
Thank you.
Okay.
Jumping right in, school's been open for pretty much 2 weeks. We had a really nice lead up to the students coming with the staff there for 4 days, and a special day for the new teachers. facilitated by the teacher, mentor leaders and Roy and Julie. And that was a great way to welcome our new staff. Quite a few. Do you remember off the top of your head how many brand new folks to the district?
We're about 75 people there.
Yeah, not all new teachers.
Not all new
'cause
teachers,
The
but-
mentors attend with them. I think there was about 40 new teachers, which is a little more than usual. It's not completely out of the realm, but a lot of turnover last year with retirements and COVID impact, I would imagine. We were able to open the year for the first time in 2 years. Normally, which means we had a big gathering in the high school gym. And our employee recognition event, which we honor people for seniority in the district, and then the teacher of the year for the elementary, secondary, and vocational technical center. And then I do a little welcome, and we had a presenter there all day doing training with all the teachers, which was a really nice day. This year was a little different because we did 3 days with the returning staff, and then we had a weekend and we did another day with the staff, so the students could start on a 4-day week, and then they had another 4-day week, and then a 5-day week this week. So kind of a easier start, which is what everyone seems to want and is used to. But we remember we started a whole week later too. That was a big change. People seem to really enjoy the more time in the summer. And I think we beat the heat for the most part. It was still a little warm that day that we had the in-service for everyone, and then it's slightly warm, but it's not that July, August heat, 90s and 100. We started the year, we have about 1,811 students enrolled, a really strong enrollment. Pretty happy with that. We've had some big increases at the White River School, which was a little low last year. The tech center is way up. They have 326 kids, I think. That was quite an increase, almost like 49 kids from last year. It's huge. And the high school is way up, 551, I believe. So that was a nice start. Which we've been working on for years, trying to increase those numbers, and people are looking for us and coming because they say we're creative, we think a little bit out of the box, and getting a lot of positive PR for that. We started the year almost fully staffed. The places where we're still short, and pretty much the whole state is short, special ed teachers. Still have a couple vacancies there, so that's difficult. Got a lot of people on staff that are filling the holes, and custodians. We're hobbling along with custodians, but we are really short. And everybody's doing extra to fill in the holes. And bus drivers, very short bus drivers. The kids and the staff seem to start really well, very happy, very positive, really, like Roy said, really excited to be back without masks on, which was nice to see everyone. Unfortunately, the first week, the second day of school, we had some bus delays, and they've just permeated the first couple of weeks, which is really difficult. Coach and I met with the bus team, the president, the district manager Monday, working on some solutions, and also, dealing with contractual issues. Pretty frustrating, but we're working on it as hard as we can. I think it was all sort of exacerbated by the accident, which was most unfortunate. And we're dealing with that every day, trying to work out more regular busing, more on-time busing. We've been told we're gonna pick up a couple drivers this week, so that next week should be better. I know people are sick of hearing me say I'm sorry, but I'm sorry. Can't make people. If you notice, there's quite a labor shortage in the Upper Valley and across the country. But bus drivers are really short. So Coach and I are drafting a letter. Trying to recruit some folks from within the district, but also within the community that maybe have a CDL, or even better, have the bus endorsement and the CDL. Talking about the rates of pay and the hours, quite flexible, paid training, nice starting salaries. So hopefully that'll help. Other districts have seen some relief from people within the community stepping up and saying, yeah, I want my kid to be able to get to his game. I want my, kids to be able to get to school on time. I want to go to work on time. So we're aware of the issues. If we don't like it, and we're working as hard as we can to resolve them as quick as possible. Couple positive things in the schools. We have almost 50 people signed up to do a book study on the Vignette book that we gave to all of you. Really exciting. That's pretty much it, I think, right now. Questions?
Any questions for
Thoughts?
Peter?
So, Tom, you mentioned the fact there had been an accident, and that is deeply unfortunate, but it's not enough just to say it's unfortunate. I think we need to have some understanding of what happened and what we can do, if anything, to prevent it from happening. The fact is that we don't own the buses, we don't own the drivers, we're not providing the service, but our name is on the side of that bus. And our students, more importantly, are sitting on those buses. And I think it's important that we have an understanding of what did happen and what, if anything, we can do to try to reduce the risk of it ever happening again. So if possible, I would very much appreciate it if we had some kind of study on what happened and
Yeah.
results reported out.
I have to do my own investigation of what happened in addition to what the bus company does, just to do my due diligence. So I'll be sharing that with the board. And it'll be extensive. Right now, we're still studying, I've reviewed the tape. I've met with the bus company about that. And right now I'm concerned about training, making sure we have the best training for the drivers. And most of all, making sure that the shortage doesn't have any effect on the quality of the drive, the quality of the coverage of the routes. Kind of obvious, but that's probably about all I can say in public, but I believe we'll talk about that later in the executive session. Some details.
Thank you. That's all I
Yeah,
have.
thank you.
Thanks, Peter. Russ? Ava? Any questions for Tom on his update?
Was I just prompted by Russ? Is that what I just caught, or is that by? you?
No. I the teacher in me, I just
Teacher.
said, let me wake up. No.
No, no, I do not have any questions for Tom right now, but I will be reaching out to Tom separately to actually have a conversation about an adjacent and potentially related issue around buses. I just want to check out with him first if he thinks that this is something that we should bring to the board or not. So, so Tom, I will be reaching out to you.
Okay,
I'm not sure which hat I'll be wearing. It's a little bit of both. There's a parent hat in there and there's a school board member hat in there. So there's slightly different issues that I just want to run past you as an aside.
Yeah, it's a little tricky sometimes, and a little, funny too, in a way. When you put your hat on and it's got 5 or 6 different brims on it,
Yeah.
You have to go spin them and figure out which one am I talking. So
Yeah,
we understand.
good. So I'll be in touch and then we'll figure out if it's something to talk about as a group.
Cool. Thank you. Oh, just as a quick formality, that we didn't, cover.
There you go.
Sorry for the technical kerfuffle. Those do occur from time to time. Tom, would you mind introducing our newest member to our team? This being our first board meeting, we really haven't had a chance to introduce her to the public. So if you would, please.
Yeah, I had forgotten about that because she did attend the summer retreat, but Dr. Julie Robinson is here. She replaced Kathy Newton as the elementary director of curriculum instruction and assessment. And we're just thrilled to have her here. She came from the University of North Dakota and was a professor there and wanted to come here. Her son goes to school at the high school and really enjoys it and wanted to take a try again in public school. What else can I say? Want to say hello to folks?
And again, thank you so much. It's wonderful to be in this district. There's not another place I'd rather be. And my son is just absolutely thrilled to be here in this community, and so am I. So thank you so much for having me.
See, her son was the early adoptee as a new hurricane.
Yes.
Now mom is a new hurricane as well.
That is correct.
Okay, back
Thank you
to
for
our
remembering that quote.
back to our formal piece. Under the governance process, a board summer retreat outcomes.
Yeah, just we put together a little slideshow, just trying to summarize for the board and for the public what we did at our summer retreat a couple weeks ago. And hopefully we've captured the high points or the big points that that were expressed at that meeting. It was really, I thought, really fruitful, really positive to get some direction from the board about the ends. We've been talking about the ends policies for years. They were developed by a board back in 2008 and haven't changed since. Not that they're really old and antiquated, but there's something that the board needs to review and make sure this current board is comfortable with what was said and probably update them and tweak them a little. So here's some feedback from the school board members about our ends reporting. Everybody probably remembers that at the end of the school year, we do quite a dog and pony show around the principals coming in and presenting data and anecdotal information about their schools and the successes they've had and progress they've made. But those reports, as much as we tried to have them consistent amongst the schools, they're not always reporting on the same data points and the nice balance between the data and the anecdotal sort of information. So one of the things that came up when we did the retreat was the board would like to see more frequent reporting, reporting from a variety of types of evidence, both quantitative and anecdotal, include longitudinal data, so trends over time, progress over time, maybe even regression over time, and so that we know what we're working on and why. They really wanted to see that reporting done by me and perhaps not by the principals. I did add designee because there are times when Julie and Roy are gonna have the most up-to-date information, and there are times when I frankly need to delegate to others, so I'm hoping that designation works. Obviously, I'm ultimately responsible for what any designee reports, so if there's something that concerns the board or any sort of corrective action, it would be on me as the superintendent to make that correction and respond with a plan to address the board's concern or need. Really wanted to focus on outcomes, identify both strengths and areas for future attention. A lot of the times, and I understand why the board asks this, is, you know, when you have a presentation from principals who don't always come to these meetings, obviously they want to put the best foot forward and the most positive impression for the board about their school. You don't bring up the things that are lacking or the things that are deficient. You're going to bring up all the great stuff and every story that makes you feel warm and comfortable about what's going on in the schools that that we all manage. So I get that. I think with me, you probably will. I'll be more comfortable talking about areas of need, what we're doing about them, and asking the board for resources to support programs or you know, things to address those weaknesses. So I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think we are focusing on 2 ends in a year, not all 6. So that really helps us narrow it down so we can really pay more attention and put more energy into reporting out on 2 ends. Any questions? Is there? I'll probably stop after each slide. So am I on target, or did I? Some of this I forgot to mention was based on a survey we did before the retreat. So we knew what to focus on when we did meet in the retreat. So what I think we heard and what Julie, Roy, and I think we should focus on this year, as far as 2 ends, were academic excellence and health and well-being. And the data really supports this, that the reading and math scores plummeted nationally during COVID-19. So over the last 2.5 years, we've seen a decrease across the country and in the Hartford School District, and we're all really concerned about that. So, you know, when kids were here every other day, kids were in and out with COVID, teachers were in and out with COVID. There was a tremendous lack of consistency sort of across the board, and kids suffered. I think the younger students more so even. So we've seen several articles about the regression or the lack of learning that's occurred, not even regression, but just the stagnation in the scores. And then additionally, student stress levels, behavioral challenges, feelings of sadness have increased disproportionately. 37% of high school students reported struggles with mental health. And we've certainly seen that in the Hartford School District. So that's what we're most concerned about. Hoping that that's a good place to start for this year. Questions, concerns?
Well, just a kind of a commercial for the upcoming community engagement meeting. One of the key topics that we've been discussing, you know, is looking at our staffing patterns, and not just the raw numbers, but how they affect these specific areas. So you take a situation like health and well-being, and you hear the national reports, we know what the reports have been here locally, but then you get a ray of sunshine and a glimmer of hope when your student rep puts in a report today. Wow, I can talk to people when I need help. That, you know, we need to make sure that the community understands that, you know, we've made decisions as a district to support that effort. And, you know, that's important, you know, so anyways, that's the commercial.
Well, I'll
Yes.
just add to that. Having recently joined the HCC, I was shocked at how deep this problem actually runs. And I think we really do need a high-level education program just to say this is why it's necessary. Because of course, everything I do is thought about the budget, but to rationalize or support why there may be increases for this specific area, because it is an exceptionally serious issue.
Oh, yeah. You know, and that point is well taken. And, you know, one of the things that I think sometimes it gets overshadowed when people think about budgets. But in a way, that speaks to our philosophy and our commitment. Because if we said that this is important and then we don't support it, then are we really doing what we say? You know, just like we did, you know, with our equity work. You know, we put money in the budget, we made sure that it was approached. The whole district is, you know, getting excited about the work. So, you know, I think the quote was, a budget is a moral imperative, or it should be. And that's what we'll have to try to continue to do. So you have the floor.
Yeah. And
Sorry for the commercial. You know, every 30 minutes or so, we got to do a commercial.
And the reason, I mean, these two ends really work in support of each other. It's sort of a symbiotic relationship in a lot of ways. I mean, the kids, they're not going to do excellent academically if their needs aren't met in the social emotional arena. And I think everybody knows that it's sort of similar, like some of those needs of food and health and safety. You have to have those needs met before I can put my best foot forward to learn and to think and to grow. And so they really go well together. So that's what we want to focus on. And the way we'll do that and report out on it, got this handy little pyramid. And the foundation, which is, you know, me or and my designees will report out evidence of work towards the ends at meetings in November, February, and then May, June on those two ends. Julie and Roy will be doing a lot of the work with the principals, you know, to collect and compile data in a way that's think. You know, that we're not reporting different data from different schools, we're reporting similar data from all the schools, so you know where we are. And we'll be able to hopefully tell from that data what we're doing well or making progress on, and areas where we're not, and trying to make hypotheses about why aren't we. So is it a lack of resources? Is it a lack of focus? Is it a lack of time? What might be the barrier to making progress in that area? And I think that will really focus our work and the board's work on what needs to be done for the future. So we're pretty excited about that. Does that make sense to board members? So some of the data that we will be looking at, academic excellence, with district-wide STAR data, which is the assessment we use K-8 or first through 8, right? We don't use it at K, in reading and math. SAT scores at the high school level. EL education data, that's our new language arts curriculum. They heard about a lot last year. Independent senior projects. You've heard quite a few of those over the years, and the exhibition night, honors thesis, student projects from classroom project-based learning activities, STEAM projects. And then in health and well-being, I mean, our big assessment is that panorama survey. So it measures student social emotional learning, student competency and well-being measures. Two key pieces of data, behavior and attendance data, which we track very carefully in our Student Information Center. Community service projects, second step, school-wide community initiatives and events. So as you can see, the balance of some quantitative data, but also that anecdotal feel-good stuff that you see and how kids are performing. Anything Julie or Roy want to add?
I think first and foremost, I think we'll be working with the principals as well, always looking for new data sources. I think the concept of the data is there, but what do we want to use and how do we want to reflect upon it? So just know as you all give us feedback throughout these presentations, we'll have a better view of what then we can work with the principals to see. There's a data point that will hit the information you're looking for.
Yeah, and if there isn't, we might have to find one.
Mhm.
So if there's a hole in the data or a hole in question that we can't answer, we might have to come up with another data source.
Isn't there a state survey which assesses at-risk student behaviors?
Well, there is the youth risk behavior survey, so that's a good point. We probably should add in that data. It's done every 2 years, so it gets a little wonky.
Yeah, it's not gonna be totally up to
Yeah,
date, but
But
gives you
it is
something.
a data source. A lot of people look at that data, so that's important.
Right.
And I mean, I got a couple of questions. First off, what is second step?
It's a social emotional learning program that's being implemented in the elementary grades.
Okay, thank you. Then we won't get into my academic excellence concern, but under possible data sources. Maybe we could do something with students going into military because it's becoming a national security issue, according to them, that students don't have the education to work our high-tech weapons or either not in physical shape or whatever. So that sort of fits right into the ends policies and gets to where an expansion. So we're covering the entire demographic type thing. And the other thing is like in the tech center, do we have information on placement or maybe certification or working towards certification programs? Again, since we definitely need to focus on all students versus the traditional college bound track.
Yeah, great points. And both, the placement data is sort of easily attainable, so that would be helpful. The outcome data, which is how I sort of categorize your question about the military, is something that we've sought for years. And we've had a hard time trying to put our thumb on how to get that, but I think we need to brainstorm some ideas on, when kids leave the high school or leave our schools, where do they go? What are they doing? How successful are they? What did they do well in? What are they maybe weak in or needed more and felt like that was a barrier to success? That's always been something we've been interested in, but we haven't been able to figure out how to do that. So we might have to come up with a plan and put some resources into that sort of longitudinal study there.
Are we,
We have some few kids come back and tell us, boy, science classes really prepared me for this field I'm in, or English classes really prepared me for the writing that I have to do in college, but it's sort of haphazard. It's not.
Peter.
do we still work with the military to administer the ASVAB?
We have it available for the ASVAB, which is the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery.
Yes.
I believe we use it when we need to. It's not done like it used to be, where it was done at all 10th graders, I think.
Yeah, it got to be very politically questionable times, given that the military may or may not have been done. And I wasn't sure if it was still available.
I did check that it's still available and we use it when we feel like a student doesn't have a direction. But Yeah, we need to come up with something.
Well, I think education's evolving just like everything else. And, I think that what I'm seeing, in the materials that I get a chance to read is that we're in the middle of probably the most innovative time that we've ever seen. And so if we don't take advantage of that happening and that occurrence to solve some of these questions, because they're not necessarily dilemmas, they're just questions. And I think that what we need to do is have those brainstorms at any level necessary. I like to call it, thinking of Disney, Imagineering. That's the way we need to approach, a lot of this. And we'll be able to do our job better with that data. So it's all
Well, it
there.
hurts to hear anytime that a kid or student can't do something that they've wanted to do because we didn't prepare them or we didn't provide the activities to prepare them. So I get what you're saying, Russ. I think that's super important that we know what students want to do and we're working with them to prepare them, or our curriculum just in general provides for that. That's why I used to really like the ASVAB, because what it did was unbeknownst to the child, to the student, they would answer a series of questions. And then it would do sort of magic behind the scenes and say, well, you're strong in this, and this. These are jobs that really depend on those skills. And you might do well in these 3 or 4 fields. And it did that all along the board. It was like, 100 questions or something. It was pretty extensive. So I'm sure there's something, even if we don't use the ASVAB, I'm sure there's some sort of interest inventory that could guide us
There are several.
that way.
I rest assured, there are several. And we can talk about that at another time, because they're there. We use in technical education, there's 3 batteries that are available as just part of our existence in the state.
Well,
So it's not going to even cost us anything to utilize some of those tools.
It's
But
always
they're
been
there.
my desire to have every kid have a plan too, and we haven't quite fulfilled that desire yet. But it's part of why we have 4 counselors at high school, and that's a much higher ratio than most schools have. 4 for 500, 550 kids. Most schools would have 2. So I think some of this is on them and the high school administration, and needs to make sure every kid has a plan, and their plan has scaffolding to support their success.
Well, just 2 things. Anecdotally, we would have some information about it, because a lot of times young men and women who are going in the military wear the uniform when they are at graduation. And also anecdotally, I would imagine if somebody fails to meet the criteria, we would know about it in the school system. And I remember taking the ASVAB. It was a great source of swag, and I talked to a lot of really nice recruiters.
I have much the same memory.
Yeah, right.
I don't want to put you on the
No,
spot, but I think before that you did, and then we all started.
No, that's okay. The only thing I think I was gonna say is that, some of the data sources that are on here, are ones that sort of show sort of that over the course of a year, what's happening. And then what I hear you saying is then there's that piece of, and then what happens after.
Right.
So I think that's that next layer. So
Yeah, and that's part of the board's role, to kind of operate at that 35,000 foot level. I mean, we're supposed to, do the administrivia as well, but our primary function, I feel, is at that level. And Tom's point is well taken. I remember when he started, one of the things that was on his wish list was exactly that. And and I knew where it came from, being a special educator. He was thinking in terms of like an IEP for every kid. You know, that ultimate plan, you know, the parents, the kid, and us knew kind of where things were kind of aligning. Not necessarily going, but kind of aligning. Because the stars do things along the way.
Yeah, I mean, it's all part of that. Yeah, it's like a success recipe.
Mm.
You want to know what the child's skills are and strengths and abilities. And then you want to know what we have to provide to support them and what they want to do with it all. So it's kind of like, you know, the three things of trying to figure out how to help a child be successful. And it also works. Sometimes you have those students who want to do something that, you know, either they don't have the aptitude for or the skill for, or they don't understand it. You know, like I want to be a doctor and I hate science with those kids. I want to be an engineer, but I don't like math. We got to work on that. You know, those are like, yeah, I want to be a writer, but I avoid all the English composition courses, you know, because they really don't. Well, and kids can be like that, you know.
Right. Ava,
Her hand's very small on the screen.
yes.
so
Oh,
I
yeah,
don't always see it.
That was a little thing.
So, you know, not to be Captain Obvious, but aren't we talking about the PLP plan? We already have this tool that was like mandated by the state in 2014, and aren't our high school students already supposed to be doing it? Filling this out each year says, this is my personalized learning plan, and these are my plans after high school. And, you know, if we used this tool kind of like an exit interview for graduating seniors, we would have a lot more information. I suspect we are not using our tools as, not that we have time or bandwidth, maybe now is the time, since we're really looking for this data, maybe this is the time to really double down on that tool, and start even getting parent engagement and talking about these things about what's going to happen next year. And even we could build in some kind of follow-up next year. Great, what's your home email address so we can send you the survey next year to find out what you did, right? I mean, I think this wheel has been created already. I don't think we have to recreate it.
Well, that's why I was sharing to Hava that, you know, we do have a lot of tools
We have tools.
and we don't have to reinvent the wheel. I think some of what's going on now, what technology has allowed us to do is actually catch up. You know, and I think that if we expand our vision a bit, we'll see exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, we all want this data. We all want to know,
Yeah.
how are our kids doing? What are they doing?
We've always
No.
wanted.
I agree with Hava in theory. I think in practice, the implementation of PLPs and following is very scattered and in a lot of cases unsatisfactory. So I think we need to look at that. And I can speak personally as a parent on this. And some of it is my kids like to avoid things, but
So
It's sort of like, you know, the standards movement.
Mm.
In my mind, it was almost like prematurely thrown out there, and people weren't ready to sort of aggregate the data and figure out how we were going to assess things with, you know, maybe 130 graduating seniors, and you're all trying to figure out how to aggregate all that data and determine whether they're successful or not, or where the weaknesses are. So that's part of the problem with the PLCs, and part of the problem with the standards is the colleges can't even deal with it. So everyone in the high school level is moving towards standard. The colleges are like, how are we going to handle this? They can't. Julie probably knows a little more about that than I do, being at the college end, but sort of premature. But I mean, like Coach said, we've got data now, or with technology we can get the data into some sort of form that we can follow and track it, figure out if we're making progress or not. I think it's much more hopeful now, but. Dr. Peter and,
No, I was just gonna say is the part of the issue is that the tools and programs we have are very much aimed at what you were doing in school. They are within the bounds of the school. And what we are forced to look at by our ends, your universal goals, really is the success of the student as a citizen of the country, a citizen of the state, as a citizen of our town. And that is larger than we're used to looking at and beyond what we're used to gathering data around. And that's an inherent problem with what we're focusing on. But as long as we recognize it and attempt to think about it, we may not get perfect data, but even nothing, I mean, a little bit is better than nothing. So
I totally agree. It's one of those things, frankly, in the school when you have. I say limited, but this town and the board have been very generous with resources. But when you have so many needs in a public school system and you have certain amount of resources, it's very hard to take part of those resources and dedicate them to students who are no longer under your charge. They're not, necessarily the mission.
yeah, well, the
So
plans that
that's-
we're talking about are designed, what are you going to be on day of graduation? Not what are you going to be the day after graduation?
What are you gonna do?
And-
Where are you 2 years after graduation? So we might have to put our money where our mouth is and put some resources into someone or several people. Being required to look into where our graduates are and what they're doing. So. Just an interesting thought about how this new sort of way of reporting on the ends really could help us all focus, not just what we're doing and how we're doing. But resources to help do it better or get information that the board's asking for. That's really important. I have to direct resources to finding out what kids are doing a year or two after graduation.
Yeah, and I mean, that might be an opportunity for tuck interns. Because they want to get more involved in government and public policy. And at least there, they could maybe start the template type thing.
Or possibly, as part of the research that's involved in any kind of grad work. You find out a lot of things that you didn't know. And then from there, that thesis brings us to the next level. And hopefully, utilizing the resources we have in the Upper Valley, which is, we've got some pretty, strong schools, in the Upper Valley that it would be really a good idea to partner, I think.
But on the other hand, if you're having a hard time saying. How well do the schools graduating from the elementary schools do in the junior high? And then again, how well do the junior high students do in the high school? And are we preparing them adequately? It's difficult to say that we ought to be paying attention to. And then how do you transition from high school to life after?
Right.
So we've got lots of areas to pay attention.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's a point for this report is it's not meant to be the end all be all of how we're gonna report, something that we'll start, we're gonna build it, as questions come up, we're gonna have to change, adapt, add to it. So,
As you recall, Peter, it took us 5 years to get to the point where we were at this spring. And we were still going, it's not quite there yet. And the thing is, it was intentional. Remember, Russ? Some of those questions that you said, okay, they got that one, but they still didn't get this part, and so it's an evolution. And as long as I guess we're willing to continue the work, we'll get to the end product.
so one of the things I thought to make sure that the board's comfortable with this is sort of what I would do in the 3 times a year reports. So an overview presentation of the data. So any district-wide data that we have report out on the 2 ends. Perhaps ask individual principals to come and share specific examples of some of the anecdotal support towards progress in the ends, but not the data, not the information that the board needs to sort of quantify or judge as far as evidence of the ends. But I think the board never getting any taste of the principals and what they're doing in their schools, sort of the flavor of the school would be a shame. And I think they really enjoy that part. But if we could use them to provide sort of some of the anecdotal information, you know, trying to determine in the reports what the data show in relations to the ends. So always making that connection. So it's pretty obvious. What strengths and areas of focus the data suggest. What programmatic and budgeting decisions have been made to support this work. And what additional future steps could be considered to address areas to focus. So I think having it out there so clearly and so regularly will lead right into these questions. I think that was pretty good. I don't know, are there things I'm missing, concerns the board had?
Okay, as you know, I like metaphors, so it's a lens. But we also know that we do have to go to the doctor every once in a while, get it adjusted. But at least we've got a reasonable lens to start from.
1 or 2?
What?
Which one's clear? All right. So possible process for revisions of the ends. What I think we heard, we tried to synthesize what we talked about as the retreat. We talked a little bit about consolidating the 6 ends into fewer, more concise ends. Academic excellence seems to stand on its own. We maybe need to update that, the title. Combined life skills and health and well-being seemed to be, everyone was on board with that. Combine citizenship with global awareness, and then not get rid of integration technology, but integrate it with the other 3. Does that sound sort of accurate to what we're doing? And then we thought we were gonna, if that was okay with people, we'd come up with an updated draft of the ends and bring it to a meeting probably in January to sort of review and present it to you, review and see if you like it. Certainly lots of room for community engagement opportunities around that once we come up with a succinct sort of revision. And then by the end of the year, have it done. And maybe that's too far out, but we thought to really do it well and so make sure we're looking at all angles. That would be good. Thoughts or support from my designees?
Just taking all of the revisions and feedback and discussion that came about for the retreat.
Also any engagement, so if we
Yeah.
did any community engagement
Right.
about this topic, we could integrate that into a final revision.
Okay, it's not if, it's when. That is, because I mean, this is what we're supposed to report to our quote unquote owners about. So without community engagement, how can we say it really works for them?
Good.
Lack of a better word. And I think the consolidate is made clear in the retreat, the consolidation would be a great thing. But, and I'm also going through this process thinking the 70% solution is better than the perfect solution. So get this in place, and as coach has indicated, consider it a continuous improvement plan as we learn and may have to modify, not necessarily the ends, but the process.
we might find out that some of the things we suggest don't support what we're trying to do, and some of some other things that we need to add. So it's a work in progress. I think that's just how it should be. All right, any other thoughts on?
No, but thank you.
Thank you.
Very good.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. So we were supposed to talk a little bit about student representatives model
Yeah.
at the retreat, but as you can see, we spent most of our time on the ends, which I think was really important.
Mhm.
So we were just going to present a little bit on the ideas we had for the student representatives tonight. You know, hear the board's concerns and, you know, take it back, you know, to think about, take your concerns or thoughts back and revise it. But Roy was going to go over a couple ideas we've talked about.
So, the one thing that it's in the materials, but the concept of the Vermont School Boards Association and the ideas that they highlighted for what they feel like would be a good system for student representation and how to have them be an active voice, an active participant. One of the things that made me feel really good is after reading the materials, watching their webinar, it aligned really well with Dylan's vision that he presented a couple of years ago to you folks. Which just shows he did his work for his capstone, which is just, you know, an accolade for him that he did do the research. He did see where the process would be successful. So what I more than anything wanted to do is just highlight some of the concepts that he's put in place for us and that we just should consider continuing on. His thought process of 2 representatives, one being a junior and one being a senior, lockstep with what the VSBA was promoting, VSBA's Vermont School Board Association. I'm getting better at that, Russ. I get mad.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Roy. I didn't want to have to get out the jar.
Yeah, so I won't cost any dollars tonight. But he also talked about an application system. And he, within his application system, built the job description. His job description, I didn't want to modify it to be a perfect overlay with the school board's version. But he did such a good job of hitting all the key points there was no reason to do so. And so I would just encourage us to continue using that application process with Tom, myself, and the high school administrators. And lastly, the concept of having a dedicated school report time, student school report time, which we have the model already. We had a template that Olivia created for us last year. I think Sydney's already started to follow that model this year, where she highlighted some things she sees in the halls, and she finished with some appreciations. That's really where Olivia set the model last year. The last component of that Olivia modeled last year that I want to continue is some version of a meeting with administration, so that students see a something that's questionable or something that makes them have a curiosity about something. I would rather Sydney not ask that question to the board, because you folks aren't in a position to answer those questions. For her to have time with the administrators to say, here's what I think I see. Do you have any responses? Do you have any places for me to go and research? So that when she presents whatever she presents to you, and hopefully a second member, it's a well-informed delivery on what I see in the building and what the potential next steps for the school are. So, for example, she could say, oh, I noticed the end report is a work in progress. I noticed the next step is that Julie and Roy are going to work with principals to look at new data sources, you know, so that it's rather than just saying, I think the school report needs work. I think that leaves, it's kind of left in the air hanging for you folks, as opposed to coming with something a little more well-informed. So One, I'd like to applaud Dylan for
Well, it was landmark.
for the model.
Yeah.
But I think we should continue following it.
So I guess, go ahead, Russ. I'll wait.
I read through the materials and two things. I agree with you with the existing model, but especially going forward, that it really struck me as we need to do. One was the quote unquote advisory opinion, advisory vote type thing, just to further solidify the fact that we value the student representative's opinion, and it gives them a slight degree of power, whatever you want to call it. And also the stuff about a board mentor and getting to know each board member at some level, because let's face it, it's a little daunting to have 2 students with 5 adults. And we've been fortunate the last couple of years where the student representative already had a tie-in either to Nancy or Peter. And I don't think I'm having any more kids, so I think that opportunity's over. I can't speak for Peter.
Coach is gonna step up.
So I think that's going to be more important. I mean, I understand administration's role in mentoring, but I do think having a board, because there may be times they're not comfortable with something and they need, and the more communication there is, the better the opportunity will be.
Well, yeah, and the sounding board, I mean, because
Yeah.
if I hear something that they think is not right, they need to be able to run it by one of the board members and say, no. Whatever it is.
Yeah.
Problem solve it with a board member rather than an administrator that they think might have some.
So. Having been the parent, I was just mentioned of a rep, the feedback I got from my daughter was that she wished there had been more formal instruction around what the role was and what she was expected to do and where the boundaries were. Because there were a number of times when she had conversations with me in which she said, is this the kind of thing I should be addressing? We never got to the point of my trying to steer what she was going to say in any way, because that wasn't appropriate, but we did have the conversation about, is this appropriate for a student rep to be addressing, to be bringing forward?
Yeah.
So I think that mentorship and the instructional process we've talked about. Tom has talked for a number of years about the possibility of making this an academic course with the appropriate infrastructural credit review processes. I think that is a very good idea. I'm not going to push for it because I know how many obligations already exist, but if a way would be found to do it, I would vigorously applaud and support that happening. Lastly, I thought the portion of the state model portion around the idea of children. I was able to talk to her, my daughter, about this and have the conversations about your role is to bring issues forward, discuss them, provide advice and so forth. But you are not responsible for the outcomes that the board reaches. You should not be receiving these kinds of feedback from people who are not necessarily going to be nice about how they address people. They tend to look at, you're on the board, you're, I can take it. My daughter at 18 or 17 at the time, that's asking an awful lot. And that's the reason I tend to be concerned about the voting portion of that advisory.
And that is a valid concern. I mean, you and I may differ on this particular point, but I do understand where you're coming from. It is something we definitely need to be cognizant of, type thing. And I hadn't thought about that extreme type thing, but all right, yeah, I mean, we'll have to work that through.
Yeah.
Right. I think having been here since the beginning, it sure as heck seems that way sometimes. But since we started this process, it's really evolved again, just like everything else. And we have a lot to be proud of. But in saying that, that means we have so much more to do. Because we're at that point where, is it perfect? No, and we know it is. So, we still have so much work we'd like to do and make sure that our students get the best opportunity from it, and we do as well. So maybe something that we might be able to offer that takes some of that onus, off of, developing a whole new course and all of this. Maybe a partnership with CCV, for example, and ask them if they would consider a special offering. And the special offering would be a policy in their span of courses that direct towards policy. And what it would mean is it wouldn't just be our kids or our students. That course would be available for any student member on any of the school boards around the state. But we could initiate this discussion. And what would end up happening is they could leave with at least 2 college credits, for example. Now that, is that's a game changer a little bit.
I think Roy had a few slides to show quickly about some of the ideas, and we did talk quite a bit about the course, whether it was a social studies or a history course or a elective sort of course run through the Independent Learning Center.
So within the application, there's the
Can you see that okay? You need it a little bigger. Oh,
better. Better now.
Definitely.
So within the application that Dylan created, I did some minor modifications around the expectations. I thought he nailed the expectations. I tightened up just a little bit around the areas around benefit of the position. And that's where you'll find the different ways that you can do coursework. The high school has a focus on place-based learning through the Teton School. I don't know if you folks remember that from Nelson's presentation. Student representative is an unbelievable example of place-based learning. You're working in your community to create learning opportunities. So that would be one of the possibilities. I hadn't thought of the CCV course, which would be fascinating if the course was made up of the student reps throughout the state. All of a sudden you have a cohort that can be talking about policy, maybe getting into a little bit of policy governance, or in terms of the
the role of student rep and what are you struggling with, you would, not only would you have a board mentor, but now you'd have a cohort throughout the state where they could start to problem solve amongst themselves. So, and that's something
Yeah,
that
that's
Julie and I can move forward with and at least see if there's any sort of interest in that.
Volunteer to teach it.
Right?
Of course.
But just so you folks see that the concept of internships or community service or independent learning opportunities, they're identified in here, and the key there is connecting them with Mark Buckland and Skylar Aldrich, who do work-based learning and student creative projects. So that at the very least, a student who wants to take advantage of those opportunities will know they're there and can make a educated decision.
You know, some of the partnerships that we did, with, the college system. And it didn't matter if it was CCV or if it was one of the state colleges or the university, is it still could be taught by a local professor. So it could be Julie, it could be Roy as the professor, it could be Tom as the professor, or Mark, or one of the others, in our cadre. But they would be working for the institution in the sense, and that's where the credit would end up coming from. That hopefully would be transferable or usable for that student somewhere along their career, if not just, the.
But having a cohort of students from across the state would make it so much more
Oh, yeah.
powerful. Because the problem here is, you have one, maybe two
Right.
student reps. It's hard to really work with.
And-
It's okay for an independent learning course, but for a course on civics or, local town government.
So the interesting thing, in your research, all of your colleagues, in the administration. And it would probably be fairly easy to survey to see
Yeah.
how many districts are there already, like us.
Most,
And at
I think
least,
most have
yeah.
a student.
And we've been working on that from the state level for a while, because we did that with the state board. Just almost 20 years ago. It's like, wow, that's scary. But anyways, so that behavior's been modeling and expanding. So, not to get in too much in the weeds, but I think it's a good opportunity for us, for our kids. And if it helps all of the other kids too, then it's a win-win for everybody.
Well, listening to the G students that are in the webinar, I mean, anytime you start putting that collective whole together, you'll get some good information, not only from just Hartford in terms of what drives our decisions, but also just statewide how students are attacking different issues. So it's going to be fascinating.
Exactly.
I think what's important from my viewpoint too is working with the students so they know it's a process. So as a student rep, you sort of have a unique perspective that's in many ways much more informed than even the board members, because you're in the school that you're serving on the board of. It's like working for a company and being on their governing board. So it's a different perspective, and I think sometimes with the student reps, and even Olivia had some trouble sometimes navigating this, is something comes up that you feel passionate about, and you want to report out that night or that upcoming board meeting, but you haven't provided an opportunity for the administration or the staff in the school to sort of grapple with it and tell you what they're already doing with it. So it's a little bit of a different process. It's sort of like when someone approaches a board member on the street and says, that principal or that teacher needs to go, and you're like, oh, where do I go with this? Do I bring that to the whole board meeting, or tell them to go to Tom, or to go to the principal, or depending on what the issue is? It's sort of like that. And that's a good point. It's a good message to work on with the students, because they don't know how to navigate that.
But I think right this minute, what I heard is a unit. Okay, you
Yeah.
just presented a unit. You know, and that unit is one that every single one of those school reps need to understand. And so that's a teachable moment, you know, and so it's a unit. And I think that needs to be part of this curriculum development piece. And we have two incredible curriculum folks right there. So anyways, that being said, you know, it fits the bill. You know, this, I'm excited about this.
Yeah, I get excited.
I guess that's
too.
all. That's all.
Did you want to go through more?
So the only thing, and not that it needs to go now, it's shared in your materials, but the concept, Peter, I think that this is this slideshow Olivia worked with me on was basically a few slides to drive the first meeting with student reps, is to try and collect all the initial questions they don't know to ask. And for Nelson and I to be able to sit with the students and kind of go through, how do you get a chance to share your voice? What's your role? So that you can feel comfortable starting day one. But a pretty good idea that this hits what you're talking about, only because Olivia and I worked on it. However, if anybody on the board looks through this slideshow and says, would you add? Feel free to just drop me a note and I'll add it to the show.
And that's the thing, you know, it's a living, breathing thing, you know, and anybody in this room that understands, you know, how units evolve and how they're supposed to be is, you know, they're never really all the same. I mean, you know, you might give, you know, the substitute that's covering for you, you know, your lesson plan, but all of the embellishments that go with that lesson plan that are evolving are constantly changing. So that's what we're going to hopefully be able to do here, you know, as well. This is exciting, you know, and you know, because it's that connection, you know, with our students, and that youth voice is so critical. Just as a reminder, keep an eye out for information about the youth council. We'd like to try to ensure that Hartford has at least one seat on that council. That was a little commercial.
That's what I had for the student rep. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you.
Great job. Thank you. Alva is, I saw she went away. Is she still?
I am here. I've just turned off my video. I'm having a little tech difficulties here tonight, so you guys kept freezing for me.
Yeah. That's the thing sometimes, you know, it's like, it can be the weather. It's things that simple, but.
Are you saying telecom is not that scientific?
Yeah.
So the HCOREI changes, I think the board is very familiar with this. They made some edits in June and we sent it back to HCOREI and I think now they're coming back to us with the items in blue. That they want clarification from the school board on. So I did give it to you in color so you can see the blue. And it's not just a darker shade of gray. Yeah, just.
Yes.
I continue to be concerned about the way the language would give the student liaisons voting rights, voting privileges, voting obligations, for the reasons I just covered. I have no problem at all with the idea of there being student liaisons. I think that is a quite good idea. And that that is important. But I do still continue to have the issue of allowing or making the students be voting members. There represent I think problems with that.
And I would tend to agree for the same reasons that Peter is highlighting of student safety. You know, these discussions that we're having are some of the most volatile discussions in our community. And not to say we don't want them exposed to them at all, but having responsibility for them is a whole nother ballgame. You know, we were asked to, I won't get into the history of this because, you know, there's a lot of concurrent things going on statewide around, you know, student voice. But ultimately the concern is keeping them safe, you know, because, you know, people are just all over the place, you know, for lack of a better way to put it. And we want them to understand, we want them to have a part, we want them to be able to share their experience, strength and hope, you know, their vision around, you know, these topics that we're dealing with. But I guess, as a dad and as a, you know, all of the other, you know, hats, you know, got to take care of them kids, you know.
Of course, and I mean, that student safety is the primary responsibility. Not as far there, because I mean, you could take that argument, even going to the meeting, and saying they're a part of the committee exposes them potentially, because if somebody's going to bring up that to an individual member, it's not necessarily going to be a rational discussion to begin with. And the fact that they can vote may make a difference, may not. I mean, if we had a crystal ball, that would make this much easier. So, well, I'm still in favor for it. I would accept if we decide it's not appropriate. I mean, because they do express opinions, at least in which is opening them up to some of that very same issue that you're expressing here, Peter. So I'll stay where I am, but I understand the other side of it.
And that's quality discourse, what we try to do, you know, like here, you know, and I think that's why we've been reasonably effective, you know, as a board, because we can have these discussions and have these differences of feeling, and they're all validated, and they make sense, and you know, so
I
maybe there's something in the air.
as I get older, I learn not to try to claim omniscience. I don't know everything because I sometimes. And it's painful, but I'm starting to have a little bit of humility occasionally. I appreciate your willingness to listen to the argument I'm making. You know, there are strong arguments for going the other way, and I appreciate them. But I do think in this case, it is better to have participation than at some level than all levels. So,
you know, and the thing is, we can do a little research around the, you know, the background piece as far as, you know, the policy implications, you know, as far as looking at, you know, advice and consent, for example. You know, the Senate has advice and consent options, you know, for certain positions. You know, that is a unique feature. You know, a lot of what we're talking about in some of these, you know, votes are kind of similar. So, you know, we need to do a little more research around, you know, how do we ensure that they get the best experience as well, as far as what policy making is really about, you know, and their part in it.
I think there's also the two in blue, did the school board have questions about members of the community interested in serving on the committee apply through the town committee application process? And then student liaisons interested in serving on the committee shall apply with the town committee application through the district equity coordinator. For those,
I'm trying to remember to our earlier review, but I thought that at least that second part was our suggestion.
yeah.
About the student lead.
Well, they have a little sort of legend here. It says request for clarification from school board. 629 changes in blue made 720. So I guess that was accepted. But I don't know what the pleasure of the board is around the voting.
So, yeah. Do you wish to, Hava, do you wish to
Yeah.
weigh in on it?
Thank you for asking. I stand actually not uncommonly much in the same way that Russ does. I feel that there's a lot on both sides of this issue. I'm thinking in particular about some of the things that I was exposed to this over this last year that I would not want a student to have to be faced with. And I understand the kind of jeopardy you, if you will, Peter, that you're sort of talking about, that potential jeopardy of pressure, undue pressure on a young person. But at the same time, I think there's a unique opportunity to be able to feel a voice heard, to be part of making decisions that is really important and empowering for young people. So, so I am very much on the fence about this, to be quite honest.
May I make a suggestion?
Sure.
We currently only have 4 members of the board here. That means that there is a good possibility of a tie. Can we defer this until the next meeting? Where we will have hopefully 5 members and we can determine it one way or another with finality. I don't normally approve of just kicking the issues down the road for some later date, but
Well, as important as this one is as important as this one is based on the conversation tonight and other, nights, that we've had this conversation. I would support that.
I could support that too.
No.
I mean, I would say that until we have the full board and take a vote, then after that vote, the result of that vote, then we can decide if we need to do additional work or research. Because if Nancy says, I'm not in favor of it, all the research isn't going to change the final vote. So why waste people's time?
Should we invite members of HCOREI? HCOREI, I don't know what the right pronunciation of the acronym is anymore. HCOREI. Is there any reason to have their opinion
Well,
on this, or really?
We've already said, we already said we support students being on
Mhm.
the committee. The only difference right now is around voting or not voting. So that's kind of a decision that is at our level. And not to say that I don't want to hear, from anybody else, but, the oath that I took is to protect and serve, and my personal feeling about protecting and serving is a little different than some. It's like I can get pretty popular going, So, anyways. And that doesn't mean that I don't, have all the respect for, my colleagues that, have different opinions. But living this work that we're talking about every day, I have concerns. As recently as last weekend, as a matter of fact. And sometime after the meeting, I'll share what occurred, and then you'll understand why I have my concerns as a person of color in our 98% white state.
And I'm fine with that. The question will be raised of me,
No, I
so there will be at least an informal notification. So that's, I'm not necessarily advocating,
right.
but I'm just saying,
but we're willing, we're still in that.
yeah,
in that
and I can
willing-
express it that way, but after I say that, they may have an impetus to come.
Yeah, which is fine.
Yeah,
Which
how
is
would
fine.
you come?
Yeah.
They could bring pizzas.
Yeah, I think one little thing that I'll add, because this kind of reminds me of the conversation about student reps too. And I've also heard this across the state with student reps on various committees and boards, including the state board. But it's not just about their actions during a meeting. It's sometimes the lobbying that goes on before a meeting where someone has a certain issue or a certain penchant for something that can be extremely stressing.
Yeah.
That I haven't heard the board talk about. I figured I'd get a mention, because I know that happens even with the student reps on the school board.
Right.
I mean, there might be an issue with like,
And that's that other piece of the dynamic, and it's, I'm glad, you did bring it up, because that is another piece to the puzzle of concern for safety and how that all intertwines. And it's there's a lady that comes to our weekly, meetings, and her job in the state of Vermont is she is the director of trauma and resiliency for the state of Vermont, and she works in the health department. And this lady is like a rock star, and so when I think about some of the comments that she's made around some of these policy points that we're bringing up, it's the trauma that can be inflicted sometimes. And trauma is so insidious that the effects on us all might be different, at different stages. So having that clarity that you just mentioned, somebody lobbying for a point could be traumatic, and we don't know what that stressor might be for that individual student. There might be something going on in their family or whatever.
yeah, and I think,
You know?
as an educator, what I've seen often with adults who have a strong opinion on something, when they're dealing with children, you have to be aware, and again, I say children lightly, because 16, 17, 18-year-olds, they're still not fully developed. They're still learning, especially in this arena. This is high level stuff sometimes. And sometimes the balance is off. So the adult has a certain agenda that they want to pursue. And the student rep hasn't quite developed their opinion on everything yet. So they're much more impressionable, and they're still developing. And I think we sometimes forget that. I've seen that play out with student reps on the school board and student reps in other areas. And that's why I want to work with them, because like that's kind of part of that development is, what is your opinion? How do you feel about that? And how do you deal with the different lobbyists or different interest groups that want to persuade you to think one way or the other? It's not an adult with an adult and very formed opinions and formed sort of where they're going to put their stake down. Kids are much more developing, even 16, 17, 18-year-olds. That's why I get a little nervous, just developmentally. It's a bit much at times, and I'm not lobbying one way. or the
No,
other.
I
understand. both sides of the argument. You want to give the kids the authority and that feeling of, that investment. But you also, you have to understand that still developing.
Well, it was fascinating just thinking about the retreat. And some of the comments that were made during the retreat about some of the subgroups within the high school that were mentioned, just kind of in a glancing, discussion, and not in any negative way whatsoever. But you could tell there was influence. Okay.
That's what, yeah.
And so as I think about that, because I went back into the archive and I was sitting not too far from him. That's what that was about. Which is okay, but I think part of our role here too, in this teaching portion of our work with youth boys, is helping them to learn how to navigate, that, and to just be stronger. And, we can't guard them against everything, but if we give them as many tools as possible, they'll be better off along the way.
All right,
So thank you all.
thank you.
Okay.
All right, the next item, it's been a long time in the coming, and I'm really happy that we finally got to the point where we can present something to the board. The librarians brought this to us last spring. And the policy committee worked on it quite a while, drafting, editing, revising. I think Peter is gonna talk to that selection of library materials.
So the concern is that library collections has become an issue of no little controversy and political machinations. And the librarians wish to have a policy that would guide them in what to do if an issue were to come up with regard to a book that is in the collection now or was proposed to be in the collection, and they needed to have some way to address the issue without having to make it up in the heat of the moment. And based on that, they provided sites to lots of different documentation and so forth on the subject of how you curate a library's collection and what kinds of criteria ought to be used when making decisions on whether to acquire or keep or dispose of a book. And based on that guidance and those documents, we drafted what we think is a very balanced approach to the subject that will prevent us from having to, as I said, make it up in the moment. I'm more than glad to answer any questions about the specifics of it. But we've just had the chance basically to do a first reading. And if you want to look at it and come back, we will have, of course, another opportunity for you to present concerns and corrections to my language and so forth.
I got a couple things just to save time. Page 4, the bottom. The sentence, such materials will enable the students to develop critical thinking skills to become discriminate users. I hate that word because I looked it up. There's two very different meanings for that word. And analytical, I think, would be a better choice of wording.
I'm not finding the immediate choice.
Page
We
4.
didn't know that.
There, yeah,
What section maybe?
selection of controversial materials on controversial topics. That is here, page 3 in our.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah,
I'm old school.
So,
No, sorry.
it depends on what printer you're doing.
Yeah.
That's actually an interesting comment. I had a history teacher once who said to me, in some ways it's sort of confusing, because when I was young and being brought up and I was told that I was discriminating, it meant it was a compliment, because you weren't discriminating against the person. It meant that you had refinement and carefully chose what you were liking and didn't like. So I totally understand that issue, and I am totally open to a different word.
I thought analytical,
Yeah.
and I mean, part of my concern is
It's neutral.
if this policy
Critical?
becomes necessary
Yeah.
without sounding discriminatory,
Right.
the person reading it is going to look with a different lens
Mhm.
than,
How about critical?
Yeah.
Critical users?
that's fine too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But that was a good catch, Russ. You know, and that's what I like about our board. Thanks, good job.
all right, I got a couple others if you don't
Okay,
mind.
no.
That's why we review.
Under which section?
Okay, yeah, I'll use section this time, so we don't spend time struggling. Okay, I think it's, wait a minute, hold on. It would be on the same, it's policy statement. It's number 7 and number 8. One talks about the timing,
Mhm.
and I think it could be perceived we're not giving somebody who doesn't like Tom's decision enough time to respond. And when you're saying 1 week, is it a business week or is it 7 days? Like, we could put 10 business days, which is still enough to keep it from dragging out, but enough for a reasonable person, if they're that upset, to have time to draft.
Right, I have no problem if you wish to do 10 business days or 5 business days or.
I say 10 myself.
It's fine with, I don't have an issue with that.
Okay, and
suggestion.
in the next one is in the last sentence. It should be present the argument for retaining or removal. Because what if the librarians decide a book should be removed? Shouldn't we grant the public the same right to complain, saying, no, I think that book should be here. I think Animal Farm should be here, or
Right.
Catcher in the Rye should be here if we decide, you know what I'm trying to say?
Right.
Again, equal.
Yes. So,
And then my last one is, I think, is when it has the citizens' request for reconsideration of materials, we should attach the policy, I mean, the method of appeal. I know it's in the policy, but if we're gonna hand this to Coach, the second page should say, if you don't like our decision, here's how you do it. But that's just me. I'm
so if
So that's more process and procedure.
it is process and procedure, but
You
still,
know, but we do that in our other pieces, you know, like Tom has done,
right,
you know,
I think
the process piece.
So if we do that,
The
because I'd be apt to give them the whole policy, that
Right.
that would sort of mean you're gonna look for it.
yeah,
yeah,
and it's like your Apple agreement. Who really reads it?
Yeah, oh, I know, all those pages, it's like.
I just want to
size
listen to
6
music.
font.
yes. And as one of the few people who actually read some of those things, it doesn't necessarily do you any good. Because you're still stuck with the question of, do I listen to music or do I return my $400 device and try to get a refund?
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. I think we can figure out a way to
cite that.
cite those.
Oh, okay, you cite the paragraph. Okay,
Yeah.
just
Right-
make it
right at the
easy.
Bottom, you
Yeah.
know, the
I,
appeal
I always
process.
get very unhappy or concerned in the situation when you have the same thing described in two different places, because then you have the possibility of being slightly, ever so slightly different, which allows people who are looking for wiggle room to say, is it A or B? And then if it's A and not B, or the other way around, how you make those decisions. So just having a single,
That's an excellent point. And
Yeah.
maybe what you do is you put it in bold and maybe a difference, a little bigger font,
Yeah.
saying the appeals process is enumerated in section,
Yeah.
boom, boom, boom.
we can do that. easily.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
that works.
Good point.
That's it.
Good point.
Thank you, all relevant and
Oh, yeah.
worthy.
Well,
But do you
that's-
have anything you want to jump in on?
No, I think Russ did a great job. Thanks, Russ.
You know, that's the intent of the review process, you know, and why we go through multiple readings.
Right.
You know, and, you know,
Uh,
and we're kind of a geeky board, so, you know, we're gonna do it this way, which is fine. You know, and actually, I'm hoping that that continues to be the case and we continue to do good work as a result of it, so.
You want to talk about capitalization?
Right, so there were a couple of findings in the last audits about insufficient policies or procedures around some financial aspects of our bookkeeping. Not that we were doing it wrong, but just that we hadn't documented properly what we would be doing it so that people could look at those if there were questions or anything like that. So there are two things that were brought up. We, by the way, had a very long deliberations on the committee, whether or not these should be policies which need to be reviewed by the board, or procedures which could just be implemented by the superintendent. And we determined that because they had been brought up in the course of the audit, it made a whole lot more sense to have the seriousness of the board approving them attached to them and make them just that much more definite and responsive. The language is not mine. I have reviewed them to see if there was anything that struck me immediately as offensive or wrong or confusing. I didn't see anything, but I am very much looking for the eye of an accountant to see if you have anything on those that you also. But on my reading of them, they look sufficiently correct and sensible and so forth to bring forward to the board.
And on that regard, Peter, the capitalization of assets, I think if you went to our financial statements, it does say capitalization policy. So that would, and that one's fine. I mean, although I will point out to Roy that they list out before using the acronym in this policy.
What
Is it in order to that?
Yes,
Because that would have been my chance to get back at you. If we just said Gatsby. See, a double standard here.
so that is the capitalization of assets one. The other one is prevention of conflict of interest, real or apparent. So we went through this. We had a very long conversation in which I suggested to Tom some things he might want to do to further implement them. They're not required by the policy that we are drafting, but I think would be very good ideas in terms of being totally, completely transparent. Those were around sort of doing an annual survey or an attestation of anything, so you know the question got asked and that you've addressed it. And by the way, just to be totally clear and get it on the record, the appearance of a conflict of interest, if it is disclosed and discussed, and it is actually understood and there are controls around it, doesn't necessarily mean that the person who has the apparent conflict of interest can't then go forward and do whatever it was. It's the doing that without that clarity, without that transparency, without that discussion that is what's the real problem.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the,
Mhm.
and my only point about that one was gonna be the end, some type of certification
Right.
on an annual basis.
And so we already had that conversation.
Yeah, okay, so I'm fine with this one too.
And the thing is, all of the other entities that, those at rooms, 98% of them have an annual research or affirmation. Be it the legislature or be it UVM, it does be that, especially when you're in a position of creating or maintaining policy.
Mhm.
Yeah. And the only other question I had regarding the capitalization of assets piece. Will we have the citation? Because there is a very specific citation in Title 16 regarding capitalization of assets.
Okay.
And just, for those folks who, like to do research, I think it's always good to, when we can. is
Where we brought it from.
Yeah, I can do that for both and bring them back.
Great.
Next time with the library material.
Since it's our first read on all of these. Cool. Well, thank you, Policy Committee. Yeah.
Okay, the town school meeting committee, I just went ahead and put the email from the town clerk on this issue. What happened is the school board's appointee to this town school meeting committee moved out of town. Mr. Celsa, Ryan Celsa, and he still wants to serve on the committee. The charter is basically silent on the issue. So I think the school board needs to weigh in on whether you want to allow him to finish his term or seek another candidate or say, no, you can't.
It is a topic of concern within the community about out-of-towners serving on our various committees.
Yeah.
However, since this committee does not necessarily have all that much authority and has been open for a number of years,
For interest.
for lack of interest, yes, I fully think if he's willing to do it, we should take advantage of it.
And the thing is, I guess my personal feeling is, if anyone exemplifies Hartford the way he does, it's the type of person you'd want on our committee anyways. An alum of our town, born and raised here, and just happened to move, So, it's like, and so he's already vested time and interest, in the process and the willingness to continue. Kind of appreciate that.
So I am in an interesting spot with regard to this. First of all, I find especially pernicious the attacks upon people who are doing good work for this town, as that they are inherently somehow suspect just because they don't live here. I find that is really the worst kind of nativism, and it bothers me. Additionally, I totally understand we're the majority of the way through the work. You're all up to speed, you're educated, you know what we're talking about. Can we just finish this, please? So I've got all of that on the other side. At the same time, when I'm looking at this and they're going, when it doesn't speak to it, my inclination is always to choose the most conservative approach, which is in this case, the school board members, select board members have to be citizens. This is a committee, yes, we have, in fact, just if you look at the HCOREI committee, there's already there an exception.
Right.
So I'm inclined to say. I would prefer that, given the out, we said, yes, they had to be a citizen, even though I really don't want to. But on the other hand, if you guys overvote me, then I can stand on my principle and still get what I want.
And you did your job as an attorney, pointing out the rainy day contingency.
Yeah, just to know legally, the only day he can't help is on voting day itself.
Right,
He can't help with the
right.
polls because he's not arrested.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I mean, and that would be potentially where, if there was going to be something,
A conflict.
But a lot of what they do is organizing.
exactly. I mean,
The meetings and getting things set up. and,
You know,
Yeah.
It's,
Quite frankly, finding somebody who wishes to take the time or the trouble to dig into this is a miracle in this day and age. And,
yeah,
and I don't want to be the one to slow things down, so.
probably should have a motion on that one, I think.
we should hear if Hala has any.
how about, what do you think?
I sort of feel it by the time you guys ask me, you've covered both sides of everything. We're doing a good job tonight. Yeah, I don't think I have anything to add other than I mean, I think you guys have covered it, including up to election day, right? These are just. I even need a moment to, really contemplate this myself.
Well, we are going to ask for a motion. And Russ, would you mind?
No, I know, I'll save Peter. I make a motion that we allow Ryan, what's his last name?
Self-
Brian tells them.
Seltzer, to continue on the town and school meeting committee, despite the fact he's no longer a resident.
Is there a second? Hava?
I second that.
Great, thank you. So we have a motion and a second. To agree to allow Ryan Salsa to continue in his role on the town school meeting committee. Regardless, in spite of the fact that he is left town.
Right. And by the way, I want to make everybody aware that my upcoming vote has no reflection on him for the job he has done. Because it doesn't.
I all in favor?
I
Aye.
Hi.
3 in favor,
On opposed.
1 opposed. And thank you all, and that's how we roll. Board committee reports and updates. HCOREI.
All right. We spent our last meeting discussing procedural meeting matters of the select board. For the next meeting, I have asked to put on the agenda the proper procedure if there's a complaint related to the school system, i.e. that there's a process that should be followed. That's all, that's my update.
Cool.
Oh, I think I'm next. Gosh, facilities. I think we're on the same path we talked about before. We're grouping projects. We talked a little bit more specifics about plans for the future and if there was to be any acquisitions or anything like that. And what work, prioritization of the work.
Short about due for a meeting.
Yeah,
Regional Advisory Board.
Nothing to report.
We actually had a meeting yesterday, so I wanted to clarify if Peter is still the rep or not.
I am,
I don't know what happened, if you didn't get the email or.
no. I was, so,
I'm sorry if I'm putting.
no,
you on the
you're
spot.
not, but
I didn't mean to.
the problem is, I was unavailable because both of my sisters who've not been in town. For many years were in town and I was involved over this whole weekend with. Wining and dining and touring and so forth. And as a
Sounds awful.
they're both lovely. But it did mean that I just wasn't able to attend.
Yeah, no, that was,
Uh,
so I
so
did,
you wish to report on,
yeah.
good, because I didn't have anything, because I didn't take part.
We had a great meeting yesterday. A lot of folks couldn't attend because of the start of the school year, but just some of the topics we talked about. Enrollment, that enrollment was up. I said before, they have 329 students this year to start, which is a really huge increase. They do have a new program on cybersecurity, so that's obviously part of it. They don't have a lot of new instructors there. They did very well. They had a retiree come back into building trade, so he's sort of like a quasi new instructor. They also have let me see, they have a science teacher from the high school who took the STEM position at the tech center. So he's sort of another quasi, the new teacher at the tech center, but everybody knows him from the high school. We talked a lot about the calendar and how well it worked this year, because it's the first year we've really aligned all this area sending schools with the Hartford calendar. So it really helped everybody start on the same day, which was really nice. First time ever. We talked about the student equity group JEDI and what they've been up to, what they're working on this year. Summer tech camp, I think they told me they had 100 students attend. So those are 6th through 8th graders that are thinking the HACTC might be something they want to pursue. So it's pretty nice that they took a week in the summer to come and get exposure to all the different programs. The new attendance policy that putting into place where for a few years they felt like it was not that important when students couldn't show up because of COVID, that they didn't get kicked out of the program. There's so many competencies in those programs that if they miss too much, they really are not efficient. So it's dangerous to sort of let them proceed as if they had been there all the time. Talked about a safety audit they're doing with the it's not OSHA, but it's their I Vermont that's coming to do a safety audit of all the programs. Also really exciting, I think the board will be interested in. We have a new director of adult ed, Aaron Tomlinson, and he's already been just knocking it out of the park with nursing program, health sciences program. He's looking into a dental hygiene program, electric recertification for electricians. And he's just had a really overwhelming response to his offerings already. We're only 2 weeks into the school year, so pretty exciting. They're working really hard to recruit non-traditional students and some of the like especially non-traditional males and health sciences and in cosmetology. 0 males in cosmetology and 2 in health sciences. So just trying to work on that stigma that is attached to those programs.
Well, one of the things that we can share, we have, community members doing a lot of those types of activities. At the community gathering that we had, the People's Barber, is a cosmetologist. So when you think about it, we need barbers, cosmetologists, and I think sometimes it's a question of understanding that. Wait a minute, where do you think barbers come from? But
2 students, the last thing I'll say is 2 students presented on their trip to Chicago
Mhm.
because they won the state competition for their business project, which was a uh, mock store and the whole business plan for a mock store, and it's called Chums. And they went all the way to Chicago and presented. They didn't place there, but they made it to Chicago, so that was kind of exciting.
Made it to nationals.
Yeah. Made it to the national.
You know, that's
That's it.
rocking.
Next meeting's November 8th. Oh, Peter, you could have these, so.
Wonderful.
Maybe get-
Actually, let me raise the issue. I very much enjoyed being on the regional board. When I was first on it, there were very few meetings and I managed to make all of them. Recently, I have been, for whatever reason, booked against those meetings in ways that I just couldn't get out. If the board is willing to allow me to continue, I have no problem being there and trying to make it.
Mhm.
I just don't want to put the board in the position of being unrepresented. Because I end up getting booked. I don't think it should be a problem, but I wasn't expecting the things that have come up here to be a problem either.
Well, I think it's very difficult in our work, you know, and it's the commitment, and it's the interest and the caring, that is first and foremost, and the fact that, you're not, just saying, okay, I'm out of here. That says a lot. And I know your interest level as far as following up, like on, the notes from yesterday. I just. So, unless you have vision, process.
I have no problem with doing it. I just don't like doing it down loudly. And for whatever reason of late, there have been conflicts that were not present in the first go around.
That's the life part.
All right.
Cool.
Policy, we just covered all the things that were done by the policy committee. We do have a couple more policies that we will be looking at that need to be slightly more cleaned up before they're ready for my involvement, but we're still working.
Cool. Russ and you have the floor.
Geez. I met with Jacob and he is coming up with some information, as we talked about, as part of the community engagement meetings, to go through how the tax rate's calculated, how sensitive, what numbers are super sensitive, what factors can affect that, and as well as some of the positions we funded through the COVID relief, which would tie into the importance of mental health, that type of thing. So that will be ready by the 29th or 28th. Yeah, type thing. So that will be another part of what I'm envisioning for the community engagement meeting. So I can bore a bunch of people.
Well, I think it's perfect timing.
Yeah.
Before you know it, we'll be in the throes of developing the budget and kind of the prerequisite to the discussion.
Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense.
Timing's everything. I shared with Alicia that I'm working on a little chart, and when I send that, to her, hopefully tomorrow sometime, I'll be sure to CC you, because it breaks down the demographics of all of the buildings and how each of the different roles are affected and how many we have in each, how many are filled, and then vacancy or not, as well. And it goes through all of the job categories. Right from top to bottom. So anyways, and that'll help you, as far as the demographic. And then hopefully we'll be able to make assumptions based on that.
HCC.
There's nothing to report.
Actually, I gotta talk to you about it.
With that,
Gotta talk to you about a project.
okay.
And
Nancy sent a little thing, I don't know.
It's Nancy, because she's more informed than I am, even though I'm on the board too, but
Yeah, I don't know if you want me to
you,
run
ahead.
through it real quick.
Mhm.
She said a quick reminder of who and what HCC is. Coalition acts to reduce the stigma and impact of alcohol and drugs, food insecurity, mental health, in support of the development of a healthy, safe, and resilient Hartford. Some of the things they've done, the annual block party. I guess she just wanted to take the opportunity to give a little overview. But annual block party, community conversations, Hartford Youth Council, Take a Bite Out of Hunger, trainings offered by HCCR, You Matter, Youth Mental Health First Aid and Teen Mental Health First Aid, Technical, which is keeping kids safe on the internet, very important nowadays.
Oh, yeah.
Prevention programming, basically drug-free communities for our youth, getting to why, prescription drug take-back days, medication lock boxes, sticker shock, awareness activities. On August 25th, we held a capacity building and strategic planning kickoff mini retreat. The agenda included a review of assessment data, training on financials, compliance, broad role definition, and project overview. They also established a strategic plan committee, which will be meeting semi-monthly. Thanks. She sent that. I feel obligated.
No
Share.
problem. I don't have, because we already know that I have a passion for an understatement, so that's fine.
I thought it was nice that she couldn't be here, but she sent the report.
But I guess I would follow up as we do the ends that we've decided to focus on. That might be another organization that we should work with type
Right.
thing, because they've done work on the very topic at the middle school that I'm aware of,
Right.
Yeah.
because I'm very recently on the board.
Well, just thinking about how it came into being and why it came into being.
Hmm.
It was what was happening with our kids, which was the motivator for that gathering. We were experiencing a lot of debilitating mental health issues. And it was the mental health community that first started the gathering. And then before you knew it, all of the service providers that dealt with that population started to come together, and that's where this all kind of started, back when it started. So it's kind of cool, so there's always been a student focus, within that, or youth, kid focus around a lot of the models. So thank you all. That brings us to public comment by any members of the public that might be online or board members at this point.
No hands up.
Okay. Ava, do you have any public service announcement?
Thank you for the invite, but I'm good for now.
Okay, great. So I guess we'll move to the consent agenda.
We do have two sets of minutes, one going all the way back to June 22nd. Sorry about that, but that's the way it goes. And then the retreat meeting minutes, which are really helpful for just jogging your memory about what we did. Thank you, Sherry. She does a great job.
Oh, yeah.
I wouldn't have wanted to take minutes of that. But she did it.
I do have one, I think, correction on the June 22nd minutes. The first one, where it was called to order at 6 p.m. But due to technical difficulties, we resumed at 7:04. And well, I love all you guys. I don't think I endured an hour, did we? Before it came back on. I think that should be 6:04. I think it wasn't that long of a technical difficulty.
Or what was the text?
Sherry.
I don't, there was something, but
Yeah,
that means we sat here for an hour, and I don't remember sitting here for an hour.
It wasn't that one,
No, it was,
but there was something clunky.
You know, part of it might have been that Sherry was kicked out.
Yeah,
If I
that's.
remember correctly.
okay, then maybe we modify it to that
Sherry was
regard.
kicked out for a while and we either
See.
couldn't get her in or didn't know that
Yes.
she was out.
Sherry says, yes, there was a major Zoom problem.
Yeah, right.
Okay,
See,
okay, so maybe we just make it clearer.
Right. So we can get the clarification.
Mm-hmm.
So if
It
we
was
could
a
just
little
ask Sherry
confusing.
to-
Now I remember.
yeah,
We continued but didn't realize there was.
people missing.
And that needs to be in the minutes, so there's no conspiracy
Right,
theories.
right,
or
right.
any-
Right, no action was taken in
Right.
that time, but
Yes,
discussion
Yeah,
happened.
so if we could amend or correct the minutes.
Good point.
To
Thanks.
include the mechanical kerfuffle, then we'll. I like that.
And there is one appointment, now that the board's back in session, I felt it important to bring a recent teacher hire to the board. Over the summer, I do that with the board's permission, but we're not in the summer anymore. So Jennifer Wallstrom, new special educator to the Hartford program at the Wilder School. Pretty exciting that we could find.
Yeah, right, that's what I got all excited. A special educator, where'd you find him?
So I would like to move that we approve the consent agenda with the modification previously noted.
I'll second that.
So we have a motion and a second to accept the consent agenda as corrected. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So moved. So let's see. The next meeting agenda, we're working on the public community engagement script as we speak. And there were a couple of items that were brought up for our next full meeting, which would be the first one in October. That email that was sent.
Second reading of the policies and the issue of voting or not voting for HCOREI student liaison. Cool. Before we get to meeting evaluation, is there a need for an executive session, given what we were informed today by our attorney?
I don't think so.
So there's no, okay, good.
See, I didn't think so.
Yeah, I
based
just
on-
wanted to make sure there wasn't
Yeah, yeah,
some other issue.
Right. No, unless something happened after that.
No,
last-
no. Okay. So. Meeting evaluation.
Oh, and somebody volunteered to do this in perpetuity, didn't it? At the end of the board meeting, each board member and the superintendent or appointed evaluator for the meeting completes this monitoring form. The responses are shared and a discussion is held on areas that need improvement. The chair collects the completed forms to use in the board's monitoring process. Board was prepared for the meeting, satisfactory. Board's time was spent on ends, not means, very much so. Each board member was given an opportunity to participate. You betcha. Board treated all persons with courtesy and fairness. Despite my dissenting opinion, you all treated me nicely. Board adhered to Robert's Rules of Order as appropriate, satisfactory. Board adhered to its adopted governance style. It emphasized outward vision. It encouraged diversity in viewpoints. It exercised strategic leadership, not administrative detail. It maintained distinction between board and staff roles. It used collective decision-making. It looked to the future. All big satisfactory.
Okay.
Chairman. Like to move that we adjourn.
So there is a motion on the floor.
I will second said motion.
and it's a non-debatable motion.
Takes a
All
lot
in
of
favor?
pleasure in saying that.
Aye. Opposed? So moved. Hey, get healthy there, Hava.
We'll work on it, trust me. Thank you guys for tonight. We'll see you next time.
Hava.
All right, can you hear me now? Oh, I can't hear you guys, but good night.